All right. Hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here and talk to you a bit about how to scale impact and specifically how to de-risk big bets. I am the co-founder and CPO of Lex, but I spent my career really in product. Prior to founding Lex, I was a chief product officer at Hinge. And before that, I spent time in leadership positions at Netflix, Spotify, and Kayak. My very first job was one of a high school science teacher, so it's been a very windy path into this world of product. But there's a lot of parallels between teaching and building really great products that consumers love. Most of us here are product leaders or aspiring product leaders. And I think the thing that we all probably have in common is that we want to drive significant impact for our users and for our company. A show of hands of people who that resonates true with. And when we think about big impact, we often think about those big, robust bets, those unknown, ambiguous concepts or features that we want to advocate for and get buy-in for. I often equate this to, if you're a sports fan, swinging for that home run. How often is a single player going to get a home run? Not very frequently. Perhaps getting on base, getting a double, but oftentimes strikeouts or strikes are the common. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how I've leveraged this framework along with a case study to kind of show you how that goes in action to de-risk these big bets. So how many of you have had to come up with a product strategy and then create a plan to execute against it? A lot of us here. And oftentimes, like there are some previous speakers talking about this, is that we all want to get strategy right, but execution really is that key that allows for us to bring this or manifest this into impact and ultimately into those next steps that we want to take in our careers. But great strategy is nothing through effective execution. And we want to talk about how we de-risk this execution phase to ensure that our strategy actually comes to life and we make meaningful progress towards those end goals that we have for our users. So let's quickly start by orienting on what product strategy is. I'm not going to spend too much time here, but it's really the process of defining what you want to achieve, how you plan to get there, and it's really based off of your company's vision, mission, goals, metrics, key KPIs, the vision that you set for your product or your team, and then ultimately how you bring that to life. And there are a few key steps in this process. We'll first form that strategy, think through all the information and data and insights that we have. We educate to get buy-in. We make that personal. This is where storytelling comes in. And then finally, it's all about embedding. You work with your team to get estimates, to find a roadmap, and then ultimately to start to execute upon that. But it's in implementation where things can really go wrong and where the details really matter. Execution is where we harvest the fruits of our labor, all the time we spent into creating and aligning around our well-informed strategy. I said that great product strategy means nothing without great execution, but great execution means nothing without really well-informed product strategy. So if we fast forward, we have our strategy, we have our roadmap and a list of ideas. Where do we actually begin? How do we sequence our roadmaps to focus on the highest impact items and the ones with the most confidence? And I think that this is oftentimes a place where teams struggle. We're either listening to the loudest voice in the room, a really dire business goal that we have to execute upon or achieve. And sometimes we oftentimes work on things that are really too big, haven't been properly vetted or validated, or we underestimate the time and resources that it takes to actually deliver this impact. And so I want to talk about a concept that I've been using for many years in both really big tech companies like Netflix and Kayak, down to our current startups like Lex. The balanced portfolio framework is something that I started using during my time at Netflix when I had a really small team and had to prove ideas that we wanted to bet on were worth going after and were worth getting more resources for. And so it helps you break down your roadmap, your plans and ideas into 3 key categories: your quick hits, what I call like your optimizations or your enhancements, and then these really big bets. And each of these has certain kind of constraints or constructs around them. So your quick hits are these low-hanging fruits. They're learning opportunities, not to be confused by fiddling or, hey, this is going to take a little bit of time, but we don't really understand the impact that it's going to drive. We really want these to be focused and centered around learning goals, low cost, potentially high bang for your buck for user impact. The big bets, on the other hand, are these things that are really pushing your entire organization forward. They're pushing your team forward, your users forward, your company forward. These are the things that inspire the company, create competitive advantages. And then this middle category is really about how you get the most out of your current investments. These are things that you have more intuition around, you have more insight around, things that have been proven in the past. Maybe they're the V2, the V3. They're helping improve the quality of your product. To create this balance, I usually follow an 80-20 rule. We're placing enough small bets in pursuit of enhancing the user experience and harvesting the gains from features that you've already successfully shipped and learning towards bigger goals. The rest of this investment is then placed in your big bets and quick hit learning tests. These are meant to help de-risk these bigger bets and these bigger investments. These quick hits should not be leveraged simply to skip the hard work of identifying key data and insights that inform strong hypotheses and just build whatever you want to quickly so you can rack up feature launches. They should directly ladder into your strategic goals and help you learn just a little bit more about the things that you are doing, whether you end up productizing the test or not. The goal here, frankly, is to learn. So let's talk more about big bets. As I mentioned, these are super critical because, one, they unlock that exponential business growth. They help you ship impact in a way that measurably improves your ability to influence in the future. But a lot can go wrong with big bets, right? These are really risky. Oftentimes, they have many trade-off costs because they can take away from other, potentially more validated, smaller investments. There's many unknowns. We don't actually know whether or not this final end product is actually going to solve the problem, and we could have spent a lot of time and energy scoping out, doing user research, building a product, only to ship a test and uncover that it doesn't actually produce the impact, the results that we are hoping for. But if this does go right, it can 10x the business. You can help build credibility in both your intuition, your ability to lead and influence, and your ability to execute with a lot of rigor. And ultimately, this can help take your organization from something like, if you remember Sketch back in the day, to a Figma. So I want to put this into action because I'm not a fan of just theoretical talks and frameworks. I want to use an example of my time at Netflix and how we actually pioneered this. So during my time at Netflix, as I mentioned, this is also a time before every media under the sun had their own streaming service. Disney Plus hadn't launched. It was still Hulu and Netflix. I led our kids and family team. And when I got there, there hadn't been a product leader in this space in a couple of years. There was no clear kids and family strategy. It was minimally resourced. And really what we were doing was chucking along, just fast following on things that the kind of broader core Netflix groups were implementing for their broader user base, kind of the you and me in the room. I started by consuming every single thing that I could about our kids' users. The research that we had, the ways they engage with the product, looking at their consumer habits outside of the streaming space. And I worked with my team to craft all of these data and insights into a brand new team vision. Now, I mentioned that you need to understand your company's goals, your company's vision. In order to create good strategy, you also have to have a really sound vision that matters. And I oftentimes say that every single word in your vision is critical. I want to get back to this slide here really quickly, because our vision, we spent weeks working on this. We sat in a room, we took all of our insights, and our entire team went through thinking about what really makes kids and family different from the rest of core Netflix. And we aligned on, we want to make Netflix the #1 trusted service that empowers kids to effortlessly engage with their favorite characters and delightfully discover new ones. Now, each word here is very important, because trust means that we gain the trust of parents, who are the arbiters, essentially, of time and access. But we specifically said that we want to empower kids, not their parents, because what kid wants to go to their parents acting like a, baby? Every kid wants to be a grown-up, a big kid. They want to be able to access and control and use the remote. But we knew that kids resonate with their favorites, and discovery was something that happened after they were already satiated with Coco Melon for the millionth time. So from our vision, we started thinking through our strategy and how to sequence this. First, we said we need to build trust with parents by increasing understanding, control, and meaning. Second, how do we connect kids with the content they know and love effortlessly? And then thirdly, how do we facilitate discovery that's grounded in the familiar? And I think that someone mentioned previously about how do you advocate for this towards your executive team, towards your leadership? And I'm a very big fan in both using numbers, like actual data and actual revenue metrics, but also visual storytelling, I think, is a really critical skill and something really critical that we all need to really dive in and invest in deeper. So we created this castle metaphor, a castle because, well, it's kids. We want to be playful here. But I think a lot about this like a house. If you do not have a solid foundation, you're not going to be able to build anything on top of that foundation. You'll constantly going back and dealing with cracks in your walls, unfinished plumbing, things of that nature, where you're going to have to invest time and time again in patching the holes. And so through this framework, we were able to advocate for, some minimal investment in our strategy, unproven. So a big shift that we wanted to make was approach the kids' user journey very differently than the rest of Netflix. Rather than starting with hey, I want to watch something, we understood that kids started something very differently when they approached Netflix. They said, hey, I want to watch Pikachu. And our job then was to help them find Pikachu as fast as possible, help them engage, and then ultimately help them discover something new that was connected to that character, that storyline, or those themes, and then rinse and repeat. So before we started out with our actual roadmap, we did a broad array of explorations. And I want to show you a couple of the different things that we started to play with and think through from a design and research perspective. And the first was, how do we help kids connect with favorites? So we knew that kids gravitated towards familiar loved content. And so how can we make more moments of truth by helping them connect and immerse effortlessly with the things they know and love? And so kids' favorites were the first things that we had kind of thought through. As soon as you come into Netflix, you see your favorite characters. So idea number 1, character universe. Imagine a world in which a kid comes in and they pick True, and they're able to fall into a world of all of her content. The characters, the moments, the favorite songs, and dive into this world from start to finish. The second was, imagine you came to Netflix and you saw your best friends, your favorite characters, your top 5, who greeted you right at the top of the screen, and you could quickly click on these items. And then a big challenge that we had was, how do we actually know what a kid's favorite is? Because that is something that we didn't really know. We knew when somebody is watching something over and over again, but there's 2 challenges we had. When does that favorite no longer become a favorite because the kid's aged out of it? And how do we assess a new favorite? So we were thinking through which idea do we actually want to start with. And so we go back to this concept I mentioned around quick hits. We had 3 really big bets that we wanted to make. Each of these features in and of itself is going to take months and months and months and multiple teams across the organization to actually build. It was our device teams, it was our trust teams, it was our algorithm teams. And so we started to think through our big bet idea. So a couple of things that we had uncovered was that, 1, kids on average rewatch content 2 times more than adult users. We then started to unpack, where was this watching actually coming from? And what we uncovered was surprising. 66% of this watch time was happening from search. Now, when you step back and you think of a kid or their tired parent who's bouncing in between phone calls or trying to make dinner, search is a really friction-forward experience. I have to go into the search panel. I have to navigate to the text pad. I have to type in the content. Maybe I don't even know what the show is called. Maybe I only know the character name, which oftentimes that can actually result in the item that I want to find. And so there's all these steps, and we are kind of scratching our heads, why is this happening? And what we realize is actually our algorithm penalized and removed content that you had already seen. Because for the broader Netflix community or the broader Netflix goals, our strategy was to get people to discover new content. That's how we ensured longer-term retention and longer-term LTV. The other things that we knew were that we had a pre-query search form. And so when you clicked on search, what you saw when you were there was your discovery titles. Here's something you should watch that's net new. And so we looked at these 3 areas and we said, all right, how can we construct a quick hit test that will help us validate that showing kids their favorites is actually a worthwhile endeavor? I'm realizing that I'm missing a couple of slides here, so I'm just going to do a voiceover right now. And so what we ended up doing was we built an experiment that leveraged the things that we already had in our toolkit, which was an insight that 66% of watch time for kids for rewatch was happening in search. We had a search pre-query that was filled with discovery titles. And for those of you who watch Netflix, we have a row called Watch It Again, which in our best guess is things that you have already watched once before and might like to watch again. And so rather than building all these new experiences, what we did to see whether or not showing kids their favorite titles and reducing the time to access those would actually lead to our metric, which was increased watch time and increased days of qualified play, would actually work, was take these small things that we had already available to us and run a quick hit test. That test looked like this. We, instead of placing a user on the search inbox, we placed the user on the first title in that pre-query screen. Instead of showing discovery titles there, we showed Watch It Again titles there, our best proxy to a quote-unquote kid's favorite. And what we saw was a 3x increase in our core metrics. Now, that was a moment where we said, okay, there is an opportunity here for us to even remove friction more. And so we started with this favorites on the homepage test. And so we asked ourselves, what's it going to take to get there? We need a new kids algorithm. We need new kids character art. We need the homepage UI and a new click to play experience. All of this was done in effort to create value with our stakeholders, help us advocate for resources. And so now I'm getting back to our slides here. So time spent in kids search, profiles we're rewatching. Search was a primary area where they were rewatching from. And we started to say, all right, here is this under-optimized search UI canvas that we can actually go through and test really, really rapidly. From this, we productized that. We got buy-in from our executive team to go and build something else that was much larger and much more time-intensive. So after we were able to productize our kids' favorites in favorites in Billboard, we saw a huge success in that. We were able to increase our core metrics by 5%, which in Netflix, big, huge organization, is a really hard number to move. That was in kids' profiles. We also saw it have impact on all of Netflix metrics. But the one key thing that we did see was a decrease in discovery hours, which was expected, and we had that as a guardrail metric. And so we already had our next tests queued up on what are we going to do to solve this problem. So we started on our discovery idea. And while we had initially sequenced our strategy as builds trust, connect with the favorites, and then go to discover, we wanted to test a very quick idea on discovery that was not part of our bigger, broader suite. And so we took some inspiration from Ryan's World. Those of you who have kids, he's a popular YouTuber who unwraps presents. Those of you that are into Labubus, the idea of unwrapping something is a very just like common experience that we all love and know. You know, we got birthday presents when we were little kids. And so we wanted to reimagine and tap into the inspiration, the dreaming on how kids actually engage with their products. And so we said we need a different way that kids can discover. It's not going to be the same like they do on Netflix proper, where it says what to watch next, or we give a big billboard with an interesting trailer, and we're like, oh, that's really interesting, or to the top 10 list. We said we need something that's less intimidating and less risky and more delightful. And so we came up with this concept of kids unboxing, where every so often, after we started to see that you were aging out of a particular favorite, we would pop in some type of interesting new little capsule for you to unlock. And contextually, because this net new thing was sitting next to your favorite characters, your best friends, we saw you were more likely to actually want to go engage with it. And so through this, we were actually able to knock off multiple parts of our strategy, create a lot of value for both our users and the business. And that search pre-query form, don't forget, we ended up unproductizing it. And that's okay, because that was a placeholder for us to get validation, for us to get buy-in, to learn. So I think I want you to just if I leave you with anything, keep in mind that a balanced portfolio is constructed of your really big bets, anchored by these quick hits, these learning tests that allow for you to gain learnings in pursuit of de-risking those unknowns that you might have. But you still must anchor around these enhancements, these V2s, to continuously produce value. You don't want it to the end of the quarter and not have anything to show for your work. So my key takeaways here are, it's always important to start and develop a clear and informed strategy. Use your data, use your research to inform your mission, your vision, your metrics. Understand what you have available to you. What are the features, the areas of the product that if you could do a little bit more with or cobble together might allow for you to have new insights that inform and teach you about how something much more larger and risky might actually play out. Leverage these learnings, de-risk your big bets, gain your buy-in through storytelling and data, and then ultimately continuously learn from this. This is a flywheel where you continuously put these learnings back into your cycle and leverage those to actually create more meaningful impact across your entire portfolio. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I look forward to seeing you all in the audience. Thank you.